Okay. Well, as you can tell, our motto of the day is get up, stand up, and don't give up the fight. And we're so glad to have all of you here. Thank you very much for coming today. I think we have some people who this might be their first community meeting of ESD here. So if you are new to our meetings, give us a wave. We'd like to give you a special greeting today. So good to see all of you. We do consider ourselves a community. So if you would like to put in where you are from in the chat, you might just find that you have a neighbor here. So you can put in where you're from there. That's wonderful. This program today is presented by Elders for Sound Democracy. We're one of the projects under the bigger umbrella of Elders Action Network, a nonpartisan, volunteer-driven community of elders who are taking action to create a better world for future generations and all of life. We're concerned about what we see in the world around us, and we're doing something about it. The role of Elders for Sound Democracy is to protect and strengthen democracy now and for the future. And today we're celebrating you and all you do to protect and strengthen our democracy, whether they're small actions like talking to neighbors or doing postcards or going to a rally, or big actions. Every action matters. Many of us did not start out to be activists, never planned on it, but here we are. And people, everybody working together, making a difference is where we find hope. Robert Hubble wrote, "If you are frightened and anxious because of the political landscape in our country, join a grassroots group. You will find other people who are anxious and frightened, but courageous enough to act despite those feelings. And in facing down their fears, they are stepping outside their comfort zone to respond to their nation's cry for help. History will remember all of you as heroes of democracy during a time when it mattered most." And we are honored today to hear from 4 of our elders who have answered that call to activism in their own way, and they're all different ways, but have found that way. And we are so happy to be able to talk to them. Each will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes and tell us how they got involved and what they're doing now. And then we'll have time for a Q&A. So as you listen to them speak, if a question arises, please put it in the chat, and Therese will be monitoring that. So when we have Q&A, we'll have lots of good questions. After that, we will have a breakout session, and we'll get to know what all of you are doing in your own way. So let's start. Our first presenter is Jeff Daniels. Jeff Daniels is dividing his time between Ohio and Michigan. And where are you today, Jeff? I didn't ask.
Michigan.
You're in Michigan.
It's summertime. It's Michigan.
Okay, I understand. It's beautiful in Michigan. And we're looking forward to hearing how Jeff went from being a college professor and geophysicist at Ohio State University in Columbus to being an activist for one of the most underserved populations. So just let us know.
Yes, thank you, Lorna. I'm going to make it brief because as a retired professor and administrator, you know that speaking for 5 minutes is very difficult for me. So I'm going to cut to the chase. Back in 2014, I had the opportunity to go inside of a prison in Chillicothe, Ohio, and I spent a day with about 20 inmates who in a very special program there. And I came home and said to my wife, I've never felt so much love in a room in my life in that room. And I knew that I had to continue some kind of work with these guys on the inside. So I went from there, and then I I worked in that program for 2 years, and then the program kind of dissolved. And I was in Kairos prison ministry for a while, and then I was asked by the powers that be in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction to lead a program called Life Builders. And Life Builders, which was a reentry program. And Life Builders was an inside outside program where we met with the guys for multiple sessions on the inside, a small group, and we became their mentors of record. And then we met them at the gate on the outside and walked with them on the outside. Our underlying principle basically was that we would we we normalize things with these guys, and this program has been ongoing. It's been very successful. I continue it today, and even though I'm in Michigan right now, up in the Upper Peninsula, I drive to Chillicothe twice a month to meet with the guys down there, and it's always just a fantastic experience to do that. I just absolutely encourage anyone who has the opportunity to visit inside a prison and be able to communicate with these guys and gals, because I've also had the opportunity to visit inside of Marysville, the Women's Correctional Institution in Marysville, Ohio. I really encourage everyone to do it. I mean, to say that it will change your life is kind of an understatement. um, I I learn from them every time I go inside, and I consider myself not an activist but an actionist, because I'm really not interested in sitting around and talking about getting involved in things. I'm interested in doing things, and so I continue to work with these guys. I think a call that I had this morning is the best way that I can summarize how this relationship has evolved with these guys. And I got a call this morning from a guy I hadn't heard from in about 3 years. And I met him inside. I met him on the outside. He got a job, and then he fell off the wagon and was an alcoholic for a year, and then he went into rehab. And I didn't hear from him. I haven't heard from him for about 2 years. And he called me this morning. He said, "Jeff," he says, "I've been in rehab for the last year, and I'm doing great. And I am going to I'm going to be a house guide inside of this program, and I've decided to do that." And I hear this all the time. The guys who have been on the inside come outside and they serve each other. And that's why we call our program Welcome Home for Life Network, because it really they work across boundaries, and they work with each other. I can't emphasize enough how much need there is on the inside for volunteers and people to go inside and give these guys hope. Because as one of the guys that I met inside and developed a friendship with has said to me, he said, "Jeff," he said, "what you guys do on the inside is to give these guys hope." And that's primarily what we do. And then they become our friends on the outside. And I can't say, if you ask me who my best friends are, I will tell you right now that most of my best friends are felons, the guys that I met on the inside in all kinds of areas. So, and with that, I know we're short on time here, so but it's
That's,
wonderful. And like I said, I think what led me into social justice issues and all of the things that I do.
Jeff, that is just such a moving story, and thank you for it. And one time we were scheduling a meeting, and you said you couldn't attend because you were doing a wedding for
Yeah.
one of these guys.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. Back in was one of my friends got out. Uh, well, geez, he's been out now for 5 years, 5, 6 years. And he was getting married, and I said to him, well, why don't and they were kind of looking for a place for the wedding. And I said, well, why don't you do it in my backyard? So we had the wedding in our backyard, and I don't know, we had about 50 people, 50 or 60 people working for Catch Court in Columbus. That's
That's that's just
now. And he and him really become friends of ours. Yeah.
yeah,
So.
that's just a beautiful story and just really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. We're proud of you, Jeff. You're doing that. That's good.
Hey, that's a word I don't use. I don't use the word proud. I use the word pleased.
Oh, we are. Okay, I'll take it. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Our next speaker is going to be Joanne Fitchie, and you'll love to hear what she's saying. She is from Seattle, Washington. She is a dynamo and a researcher extraordinaire. Giving her an issue, she's going to take it on, and she's not going to let it go. Many of us have started our activism later in life, but Joanne has had a lifetime of advocacy, and she even admits that she's done a little bit of good trouble along the way, right, Joanne? Yeah, let's hear from Joanne.
I like good trouble. In the early 70s, I became director of equal opportunity for the University of Maine, and that's when I first became an advocate on behalf of employees and students who were women and girls, African Americans, Native Americans, and also people with disabilities. After retiring from the university and from other professional positions, I've since worked as a volunteer advocate for young adults with disabilities and for the elderly. But it's been only since March 2026 that I've been learning about the cruelty and the injustices suffered by immigrants living in fear of ICE and detention, or currently living in a detention center less than 6 miles from where I live. In March, I was so horrified by the stories coming out of Delaney Hall, the detention center in Newark, New Jersey, that I wondered what's going on at the New Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington, which is 6 miles from where I live. I actually live in the Tacoma area rather than Seattle. And this is what I've found out. And I guess what has motivated me in all cases for advocacy is injustice and needless human suffering. And I've never seen injustice and needless human suffering like what I've seen and heard about since I've become very immersed in this issue of the problems of immigrants. In the detention centers are really concentration camps. And by definition, that means that the individuals who are imprisoned are not there for any criminal act, but because of who they are, their ethnicity or race, or where they came from. Examples are the Japanese American citizens in the 1940s after Pearl Harbor, and now the 600,000 individuals, the majority from south of the US border, who were booked into detention since Trump took office in January 2025. I mean, it boggles the mind to even think about it. And the thing is that even our current Supreme Court in Wong Wing versus United States clarified that unlawful residency in the US is not a crime. And yet they're treated like criminals. Although they committed no crime, they're being punished and deprived by overcrowding, inadequate medical care, poor sanitation, and contaminated food and water. The water is so contaminated, the guards bring their own water, knowing that the center's water is unsafe to drink. Sheets are not washed after someone has been sick with an infectious disease. A detainee with mental health issues had soiled his clothing, but was denied clean clothes. Medications, whether for diabetes or mental illness or a contagious disease like tuberculosis, are sometimes denied or given too inconsistently to be effective. Contagious diseases are prevalent in detention centers, whether they're local or national, as I found out. This is not just a local problem. The overcrowded conditions result in influenza, COVID, and tuberculosis, for example, being prevalent in these places. And because detainees have reason to fear that they'll be locked up in solitary confinement if they admit to having TB, COVID, or whatever, many don't admit it, so they just spread it. And the thing is, there's a public health problem, not just a detainee problem. The detention centers are endangering not just the detainees, but also public health. The guards work long shifts and then go home to their families and communities, exposing many others to infectious diseases when they socialize at home or in a bar or a restaurant. And similarly, family members of detainees, friends, social workers, nurses come into the center, stay for some hours with one or more detainees, and then return to their families and communities, potentially exposing others at home or in restaurants, libraries, church, or synagogue. What actions can we take? The public health dangers are invisible but real. And so I suggest that we contact and send written and oral protests to state, local, and federal officials, whether it be your senator or representative, your mayor or city manager, and your county and state departments of health. In my limited experience, the Department of Health is not necessarily too aggressive about paying attention to the detention centers because they're a little bit afraid of what the Trump administration might do. I hate to say that, but that's what I found. You can spread the word. I suggest that you spread the word by social media, Facebook, TikTok, X, Instagram, YouTube, whatever you happen to be on. about the invisible but real dangers to public health. And if you can send media releases to editors and journalists with your newspapers, radio, and TV stations about these dangers to public health, please do so and write letters to the editor. Another very important action that's needed to block ICE and Border Patrol from getting personal data to entrap immigrants. I just found out recently about this problem. Is your own state's Department of Licensing or Department of Motor Vehicles. Most law enforcement people, federal, state, and local, are almost always allowed to have access to license plate numbers and the personal information of anyone with a state driver's license. And that doesn't matter what state you're in. So guess what? ICE and Border Patrol and the Department of Homeland Security, are all federal agencies. And so our two women from the League of Women Voters in Washington wrote to Governor Ferguson, our governor of Washington, and protested the sharing of this kind of data with ICE and Border Patrol, etc. And they got action. And if you are interested in this and you're not sure what to ask for, I can provide you with a letter from the office of Washington's governor. Could be helpful to request what the office of your own governor can do to prevent as much as possible the abuse of license plate and personal driver's information by ICE and Border Control. 65 people in 1 month, in the month of June 2026, were arrested simply because of the information that had been gathered from the license plate and the personal information of immigrants. That's just in 1 month in one state. So that basically is, there are other things in the sources and the resources that Therese will share and that can give you some ideas what you can do in the future if we get an administration and control of Congress. There are things to do in the future to repair the problems that we're having and to basically try to rehabilitate our democracy, at least to the extent that immigrants or non-citizens are involved. It takes forever to become a citizen. We have a terribly, terribly broken citizen system. It's just unbelievably bad. And both parties are responsible. So I will stop here and let.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. And thank you for all you do, but also thank you for all the actions that we can do. So those are really good suggestions. Thank you very much. Thank you. Our next presenter will be Deidre Henderson. We'll get her up. She is from Truckee, California, where she moved to be closer to her family and to her grandchildren, which we understand. And we are so glad she's here. We were wondering if she was going to be here or in jury duty, so she is here. So that's great. She has an interesting and rather winding road to her activism. And when faced with a challenge, she has taken it on with a steady hand and she's organized. So Deidre, can you please tell us about all you've done?
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm a lawyer by background. I've always had civic involvements of one kind or another through my children's schools or local political campaigns. But my journey to becoming a climate activist really started out as a land use and conservation activist in my rural community in New York's Hudson River Valley. Um, and through that work, I was appointed by my town to a county environmental advisory board. And over time, through that work, I learned about climate change. This was in the early 2000s. And it didn't take me very long to make a connection to my two children and the effect climate change would have on their future. And that has been my motivation, my North Star for all of the work I've done on climate change. So the first thing I did was what most people do. I changed the light bulbs. I upgraded the efficiency of our furnace, uh, and personal things like that. And I looked around and I realized that nobody else I knew was doing anything like this. So I thought we really need a bigger solution here. And I started reading, wandering in the desert, as I call it, for about 2 years, reading about climate science, reading about economic, what economists thought about climate change. And I decided that the most effective solution, that policy solution that we would have, not the only thing we needed, but the most effective thing we needed, was a carbon tax. But of course, the next question I asked myself is, what in the world can I do about that? And in what I can only describe as serendipity, a wonderful woman from the next town over came into my life. Her name was Iona Ludi, and she came to a county environmental advisory board meeting and talked about an organization called Citizens Climate Lobby. Citizens Climate Lobby is an organization that works on national climate solution organization, and its main it has been a its primary policy solution has been a kind of carbon tax called carbon fee and dividend. So I was very interested in this. I invited Iona Ludi to have coffee with me, and she changed my life. I've been a member of Citizens Climate Lobby ever since. I was one of the founders of the CCL chapter she was trying to put together in the Upper Hudson River Valley. I was very active. I made many trips to Washington to lobby. I acted as the CCL congressional liaison to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand in New York. But then in 2016, I moved to Truckee, California for family reasons, and there was no CCL chapter here. So when I got here, I knew my son, my daughter-in-law, and the real estate agent who sold me my house. And but I decided I'd like to start a CCL chapter, so I got in contact with some other CCL members in California and said, "Hey, do you know anybody in Truckee? Because I'd like to start a chapter here." And they gave me names of people they knew in Truckee, and I called them up and invited them to coffee. One of those people was John Sorensen. And he became one of the founders of our CCL chapter. So in July of 2017, about over 6 months from the time I moved to Truckee, I had had coffee with enough people to be able to start a CCL chapter, and we got to work. Um, as a result of my work with CCL and becoming known for climate activism in the community, I was invited to a meeting of people who were interested in passing a 100% renewable resolution in the town of Truckee. This was an initiative that both the Sierra Club and Climate Reality had undertaken back in about 2017, 2018. And I met a wonderful woman in that group, and the two of us headed up an initiative to get the town to pass that resolution, which they did at the end of 2017. And as a result of that, they have not only set goals, but they have done their first climate action plan. Um, And she and I decided that we would keep that group going, and we formed a group called 100% Renewable Truckee, which works on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and monitoring the town's adherence to its 100% renewable resolution. That group has waxed and waned, but we now have a group of young people, young professionals who have moved to Truckee who are very active in it. We also started a youth action team as part of our CCL chapter. That's been a wonderful experience working with high school students who have managed to get our school district to become much more interested in addressing climate change. They got the school district to hire a sustainability director to do its first greenhouse gas inventory, and they're now working on a climate action plan. So those students have also connected with Sue Sorensen, who introduced them to the Civic Center, and they have done a number of voter registration drives in the high school. They've, in a school of 800 students, only less than half of which could pre-register or register to vote. They've registered over 150 students to vote. At the moment, I think all of us feel that, or many of us feel that we are not going to solve climate change unless we protect our democracy, which we feel is under attack. So a group of us in CCL formed a non-CCL, sort of a CCL adjacent group called the Climate and Democracy Discussion Group. We have a speaker series where we've had some wonderful speakers. We also have determined that the two things we can do this year to be most effective on climate is to protest and to work on elections. So we have done a slide deck of things that people can do to work on the election, and we've also collaborated with Elders for Sound Democracy, the voting group in Elders for Sound Democracy in postcarding. In our community, we're collaborating with other organizations to do a series of postcarding events between now and the middle of October, which we're doing at a local brewery. We call it Democracy on Tap. I would say that I have no particular skills for being a climate activist or a community activist, other than curiosity and tenacity and persistence. I'm kind of a private person. I don't really like public speaking. I'm not a really outgoing person, but I am willing to step out of my comfort zone, which I think is a really important quality for anybody who's working in the civic sphere. And I would advise anybody who's doing this kind of work to be flexible, to try different things, to be willing to fail and learn. And the other thing that I think we as activists often forget to do is to reward good behavior. When we find public officials who are doing the right thing, we have to find ways to make sure that they know that we appreciate what they're doing. In our community, we have collaborated with a local artist who's a member of our CCL chapter who does what's called participatory art. She has children and adults from the community work on a canvas with her, and then she does a transparent overlay that inspires her about what they've put on the canvas. We've presented one of those to our town council to reward them for their climate activism, and our Tahoe Youth Action Team, the student group, just this past week presented one to the school district to thank them for the things that they have done in response to the students' requests. So that's my story.
That's a great story. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the lessons for us in how we can get involved too. Those are really important. Thank you, Deidre. Our last presenter is Casey Cameron. Casey is from San Jose, California. And she too was involved in the climate movement. This will sound a little bit familiar because as the political situation rose, I think she saw that there was a bigger issue out there too. So she took that step into activism and she became involved in a way that I'm not even sure she imagined that she could, but it's an interesting story. Tell us, Casey.
Thank you so much. I see a lot of familiar friends in the room. Thank you for hearing my story. Actually, the story begins in 2025 with the gradual buildup and suddenly the flood of ICE actions across the country. So my reaction to that, as the year went on, grew from concern to real alarm. I felt a tremendous tug toward doing something about it, but would I or could I was the question I had. And lucky for me, I live in the Bay Area, and in the Bay Area there's a growing, there was particularly then a growing resistance movement, and a lot of ideas were surfacing about how people could take action. So right around that time, in late, sort of in October 2025, a Buddhist friend of mine, a friend I met through a Buddhist consciousness raising group here in the North Bay, told me that she was working with a group called Multi-Faith Voices for Peace and Justice. And she's a member, I met her through a Buddhist group, but she's a member of a Unitarian church in Mountain View, or sorry, in Palo Alto. And this is where the Multi-Faith Voices for Peace and Justice sort of sprang from the Palo Alto people getting their act together to do something. I mean, that organization does a lot of things, but in particular, my friend who telling me about this was active in, she told me that if I was interested and wanted to, once a week for an hour of my time, I could volunteer to, so what they call accompany workers at a day labor center in one of the adjacent towns here. And it would be a case of really just supporting them, not taking any radical actions like physical protection or anything like that, just being there for them. And it would involve once a week at a lunch shift when the workers come to get a free meal. So I go, so anyway, the question became, after she told me about it, she was very reassuring. But of course, I'm picturing myself. I'm not a particularly brave person. I pictured myself standing there and ICE showing up. And even though I'd be with other people, I would have to sort of address the fact that ICE was showing up to nab people from this worker center. So was I going to be brave enough to do this? And I kind of stewed on it for about a week. I thought about it and thought about it, and she had been reassuring. So I decided to take the plunge, and I took their online training, which I must say was very well organized, very reassuring. It was a matter of learning a fairly simple safety protocol for yourself. And the implicit message that they wanted us volunteers to internalize was, we're called to protect our neighbors. And if you, ICE, come for them, you'll have to go through us. So you'll see what that means as I go on. So the assignment specifically was to go an hour each Monday lunch with 3 other people. So it's a team of 4 people, and there must be at least 3 or 4 each week. So sometimes people can't come, but at least as long as we have 3. And our job would be to greet the workers. We put on safety vests, and in the back of the safety vest, it says "Faith at Work." Now, I'm not a member of a church or anything like that. It doesn't matter. These were fine people of all kinds of faiths. Just by our presence, standing there with our vests, we each would have a fully charged cell phone, a whistle, and a roll. So I'll tell you what that is. So we would stand in the driveway, the four of us abreast, in the driveways where the workers and the other people visiting the center to get workers would drive in and park. But we were to stand in the beginning of that driveway and we would part to let cars in, but we would scrutinize those cars, make sure they weren't ICE coming in. And if ICE did come, the roles we had, which we divided, we renewed our understanding of the roles each week, and we still do this. One of us would make calls, two calls, first to rapid response, and second to Maria, who's the director of the Worker Center right behind us in the building. So they keep the front door locked, so ICE can't just barge in. So the two calls would be first to rapid response, give them the address of where ICE is showing up, if ICE shows up. And the second one to Maria to let her know, don't open the door, okay? And she then would also find, she has a way of getting all the workers. See, the workers, when they come for their lunch, they sit outside on these picnic tables. So as soon as we see ICE, we blow our whistles, and that tells them to rush into the back door of the center. So so one person makes those two calls. We all blow our whistles. We then we get two different people to document the encounter with ICE. And this, by the way, ICE has not shown up there yet. I hope they never do. But if they do, one person takes a video of the interaction between ICE and the victim, and the other person takes notes and people can take photos of of the ICE vehicle license plate and things like that. And so we all know each week we go over those and we know what to do if ICE shows up. And then in January, as you know, in 2026, Renee Good and Alex Preddy were murdered by ICE. And that elicited even more training from the multi-faith group because they wanted to make sure that we would stay safe. So they taught us to, if ICE comes, to stay at a good distance from the officers, do not obstruct them in any way. And if an agent comes, if you're filming, say, and an agent comes and advances toward you, like they're going to steal your phone or something, we are trained to take a big step back and say, Officer, I'm stepping back. I'm stepping back. I'm not challenging you. So these are the kinds of things they taught us. And also to the person who had the role of interacting with ICE. One of our members is a lawyer, a retired lawyer, and he's very confident. So we like to have him be the one to talk to ICE. And he would say, this is private property. You are trespassing. Do you have a warrant? What agency are you with? Because a lot of times in the past, as you know, they didn't have identification. So try to get them to identify. Why is this person being detained if they were coming there for a specific person? And where are you taking them? And then we can ask, if there is a person being detained, we would ask them to tell us, do you want us to make a call for you? You know, just all verbal. But and so after that second round of training, we basically felt more confident. And ever since then, you know, ICE has never shown up there. It's a small center, but people come there regularly to get laborers to do things like, you know, build a stone wall or fix a fence or something. And I will tell you, when we stand in that driveway with our vests on, it's so heartwarming because the workers are coming in and out to get their lunch, and they smile at us. They say thank you every time, like they really mean it. They're so happy that we're there. It just makes you feel like so tremendous. And I haven't had those fears that I used to have. I mean, I'm sure I'd be nervous if I showed up, but I feel very well trained and very well supported by the program. Just to summarize the impact of the program, when they told us about it, they said it has a threefold purpose. Community. It's meant to strengthen community and relationships with the workers and the neighborhood where the center is, because they're in that neighborhood, there are a lot of Latino families. The second purpose is harm reduction. Offer a peaceful and caring presence that may help reduce harm in interacting with ICE. Documentation by us can provide support for future legal challenges to unjust detainment or mistreatment. Then the third purpose is solidarity. Stand with these day workers and demonstrate that our community values their dignity, their safety, and their contributions. So be a respectful, peaceful presence. Keep all of our actions legal, nonviolent, peaceful. Follow the guidance of the director of the center. You know, if ICE were to come, she would communicate with us on her phone. And please, and this goes for everyone here, they've made a big deal of this. Do not post any information or photos of this. I mean, I haven't even told you where the worker center is, so I'm not really worried. But they told us, you know, please don't post anything because we don't want to increase scrutiny and have ICE show up. We're trying to keep it so they never come. But I will tell you, a note for me personally is that I teetered on that threshold before I took the step of joining the program. And I forgive myself for that because it's, you know, it's a nerve-wracking thing. But having taken that step, gone over that threshold, I feel so grateful that there was a program like this in our area and that I could have the feeling of supporting these people who are innocent people. All they're doing is showing up to get lunch and jobs, and they deserve to be treated like with respect and dignity. So that's my story. Thank you.
Oh, that's a great story. Another great story, Casey. Thank you so much. These all have been so profound in so many ways and inspirational, and have given us so many insights and encouraged us too, Casey, to take that first step. This first step is probably the hardest one. So thank you very much.
Sure.
I hope you've had lots of questions while you have been listening to these. Therese, how are we doing for questions in the chat?
We have had a very thrilled community today, I think. We've seen so many thumbs up and applause and gratefulness from everyone, but relatively few questions. So let me say, if there are some questions you'd like to put to one of our speakers now, please feel free to put them in the chat. I know we have one or two that I will mention in a moment. I want to let everyone know that we do plan in our follow-up to this meeting to send you a recording of the meeting. Casey said it's fine because she has not divulged any critical information. We are also going to give you a few resources that each of our speakers have been participating in or think would be helpful to you. A number of them are the local organizations they've been participating in. So those will be largely inspirational for you. As you know, there are so many local organizations, but they will give you a start. And then I want to let several people know that we've been in speaking with Linda Warner, who runs the communications team here at ESD. We've decided to try to put together some short articles about detention centers and about ICE. In particular, we're working on one now with Joanne, and we will include just a couple of her references in the follow-up, which we'll send out later this week. But by next week, we expect to have a much longer, slightly longer article, but with a much longer resource list. And that should be out in, let's see, at the end of the month, the beginning of September. And for the following month, we think we better do a similar thing for responses to ICE and for working and dealing with the polls. So we'll see more and more, but for now we'll have some limited resources so you can get working and get inspired. Now what I'm going to do, I know the first question that was put in in the chat was from Dick Almy, who raised the question for Jeff, and I might focus that as well to Joanne, and to ask you, given the focus of your activism, especially with the re-entering citizens, how do you relate that to democracy, Jeff?
Well, I think in a number of ways, and in a very short the way I will say it is that I think, looking at Elders Action Network, most of us are middle-class people. And what going inside prison has done is opened really, really the vista of people incarcerated who are not normally, or not most of them are not middle class, would not be classified as middle class. A lot of them have tremendous trauma in their lives. Most people who exit from prison have some form of PTSD. They even have a special name for it right now, that related to the prison experience. But I think getting in touch with those people on the inside and then seeing them on the outside and working with them on the outside and seeing and realizing that these guys come out of prison with literally nothing, most of them, and many of them have lost their families in the process. The families have abandoned them. I've worked with guys who have had up to 40 years on the inside, and they come out and they're kind of stunned by coming out in society. But the main thing that it's done to me is really leveled my view of things. I don't look up, I don't look down. I've always kind of been that way, but working with guys inside of prison has really emphasized that. And I will say that, I really I've reached out to some of them in terms of working on voting activities and things, and they've been extremely receptive. And so I think there's just I've just learned so much. It's really been foundational for me very late in my life.
Thank you, Jeff.
To be working with these guys, and and so I think that's really where the democracy tie comes in. I can talk to them. I consider myself one of them. Yeah.
Thank you. Joanne, could you just give us a quick connection for yourself to democracy?
Yes, definitely. Under the Fifth Amendment's Due Process Clause, civil detainees, unlike convicted prisoners, may not be subjected to punitive conditions. So the government basically bears an affirmative obligation to ensure that detention conditions are reasonably related to legitimate governmental purposes, which of course is not, we know that's not the case. Another thing is immigration detention is formally defined as civil, but it operates in a punitive manner. Detainees are frequently held for extended periods of time without meaningful judicial review, access to counsel, bond hearings, or timely adjudication of their claims. And this is also raising all sorts of constitutional or unconstitutional questions. And third, there's the constitutional protection against detaining people for discriminatory reasons such as national or ethnic origin. While immigration enforcement has historically given broad judicial deference, the Constitution does not permit enforcement practice rooted in racial or ethnic discrimination. And arbitrary detention is often framed as a policy choice rather than as a violation of international and constitutional law. Nonetheless, the U.S. government relies heavily on the characterization of immigration detention as civil rather than punitive. But as you know, in practice, these detention systems produce conditions that align with the characteristics of concentration camps, detention based on status rather than criminal conduct. And the last one is this nonsense about this is a matter of national security. That was claimed with the Japanese Americans in the 40s. Now Trump is also claiming this is a matter of the detention in the detention centers, et cetera, are also supposedly about national security. But we have here, and we have also the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, which is shifting to facilitate mass detention. And so that clearly this is, I mean, there are all sorts of constitutional items here that are involved. That when you open the door to discriminating against one set of people, you're opening the door to others. I mean, Trump obviously has indicated all sorts of people he wants to go after who have nothing to do with immigration. And we know that these people are, Caucasian. It's just that they've crossed the line in terms of making him unhappy.
Right. Thank you. And we need to share, clearly we need to share much more, and will share much more information here. As I move, thank you so much, Joanne.
Therese, can I add just one thing to what Joanne said about the tie to democracy?
Please, yes.
And that is that, in the broader context, the conditions at detention centers are horrific, and we should protest against them, and they're unconstitutional, and they're public health threats and all of that. And the actions she suggests are right on. But in the broader context of it's part of this detention system is part of the broader policy of the administration to just have a very evil and hateful and cruel policy towards immigration in this country, towards immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. So, before the detention, you have ICE goons running through the streets, masked and with unmarked vehicles, and just rounding people up, many of whom are either citizens or immigrants with legal documents, and they just get rounded up and beaten and sometimes shot. Even protesters are sometimes shot. And, so then they get put into these detention centers, and in order to get them to more rapidly be able to deport them to places that some of them have never even lived for either dozens of years or ever in their lives. To hasten those deportations, the government has shortened time frames, have cut back on due process rights in the asylum hearing process. And so all of those things are, make it this detention that Joanne talked about part of a non-democratic and sort of dictatorial policy whereby an autocrat can and his henchmen can basically control people willy-nilly without any accountability and any due process. So that goes to the heart of democracy. Thanks. I'm sorry to have interrupted.
Thank you. I think Casey's caution to really not be intimidated is a really important one for us all to keep in mind. I'm going to run through some of these so that we can have some discussion in breakout sessions, but I'll run through them quickly. If they're quick questions, if I can give quick answers. The program Casey mentioned, we will be sharing with all of you. And what about other organizations? We don't have an exhaustive list, but it's the kind of thing we're hoping to begin to construct after this session and in dialogue with our community. So part of what we'll ask everyone to do after the breakout sessions is to share with us, what are the organizations you find helpful? What are we missing? How can we begin to establish something that is more of a knowledge and sharing database? I'm just moving clear. We can share the chat also in our follow-up to this meeting, because it will make you feel just wonderful. This is a question I'm going to put for Jeff Johnson, but let me put it out there for all of us to think about in the future rather than to talk about right now, and that is, what have we done to educate the larger community on the specific issues that concern us? And I'd invite us all to begin to work on that. Okay, I think that completes going through our chat for now. So our hope now is to hear from each other, both about how did you take the first steps to become an activist, because it is scary. Even if you don't do what Casey did, I will say, for me at times, much less strong steps have been intimidating. And what are you doing? What is your larger view of what is important for you? And please do share it, because we want to get a broader picture of what we're doing, and to be inspired, so we are not intimidated. Now, Crystal's going to put us in groups. We'll have of about 4. We'll have approximately 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll come back, do a quick debrief, and move us on forward. So I just want to say once again, thank you to everyone who's here. Looking forward to hearing from you. Crystal? Crystal breakout room.
Yeah, it was.
So tell us quick. We're going to do a really quick debrief, and then Lorna will tell us what's coming up. So really quickly, tell us what was so much fun in your discussions, please.
We had touched on a couple of different things based on the individuals in the group, and but then it rounded out into a discussion of how our focus needs to be on saving democracy. All of the things that we're doing, all of the individual things that we are focused on in our own little lives and that we picked up on that we want to, help, really need the help of a democratic background. And I think that Jeff Daniels put it best by saying we really need to remember to focus on that big picture.
Thank you. Libby?
I just want to say that I was inspired not only by our little group, but just hearing the stories. The fact that almost everybody who shared just fell into something that they have given their heart to and their time to, not as like the professor giving up his job as a professor and then moving into the prisons. That's the kind of thing that we're not really trained to do. In other words, everybody just sort of found their niche and has given it their all. And I think as elders that we can model that you don't have to be trained and use your degrees or your profession to keep on doing something meaningful. That if you see something that inspires you and that you see needs help and work, anybody can do it. And people talked about stepping out of their comfort zone, and to me that's fantastic.
Thank you. It is so exciting. I will say, in the little group I was in, one of our best discussions was about how did you start? What changed your life? And we had some wonderful stories there. Jeff?
Our group was really great, and I got to meet new people. And one of the topics that we focused on was about ICE and and protecting those people. And so we had a discussion on what's up and what's to do.
Yeah.
And then we branched into a discussion on well, how do we captivate the community and get the community involved in these kind of things, which was mostly a question for me, as you know. And and there was some really interesting feedback and something that we might follow up on, and that is Joanne was saying, well, everybody knows and talks about, social media is the ticket. And but as we talked a little bit further, we agreed that we really don't do social media, and so maybe it's not the ticket. But what I'm thinking is, we have an expert in our group, Joff, who's done all these things on social media. And I think that he could put together a presentation on, you know, what you know what what really works in social media and what doesn't work, and how we would invest the time there. Because I mean, I've heard this story 100 times, and we talked about it today. And but I'm not sold, but I'd like to be sold on the idea.
Yeah.
So why don't we think about that?
Perfect.